Devarim. Words, words, and more words.
We've made it!
Congratulations.
We've finally arrived at the final book of the Chumash, the Book of Devarim.
And it's nothing like the previous 4 books, Bereshis, Shemos, Vayikra, and Bamidbar.
Something is so different about Devarim.
It's no longer in third person, as in Hashem spoke to Moshe, a phrase that we've been so used to until now. It's Moshe's words in first person.
And Hashem spoke to me. I sent messengers. I pleaded with Hashem.
And it sure is a lot of words.
In fact, the Hebrew name of the book, Devarim, means words, and the book's opening pasuk makes it clear whose words the Jewish people were about to hear.
These are the Devarim, words that Moshe spoke to all Bnei Israel on the other side of the Yarden.
Hold on tight. What follows for the next 33 chapters is a set of Moshe Rabbeinu's speeches to his beloved nation.
Join us now for this fascinating 5th book, the Book of Devarim, also known as Mishnah Torah.
Study this incredible book by Moshe. Moshe the teacher.
Moshe the prophet.
Moshe the general.
Moshe the humble one.
Moshe, the servant of Hashem.
Moshe Rabbeinu, the ultimate teacher. Moshe was 120 years old, but as energetic and strong as a young man. In fact, his skin was not wrinkled, and the light of the Shekhinah, divine presence, made his face shine with a special glow. However, he knew that he would soon pass from this world and not enter the Holy Land.
It was time for him to say farewell to his beloved people, and even more important, to teach them valuable lessons,
so they would not make the same mistakes their parents made.
So Moshe Rabbeinu, the teacher par excellence,
that's a fancy French phrase, meaning super excellent,
spoke to his people and spoke and spoke and spoke on and off for 37 days. Devarim, I am a man of words. Moshe wrote down these speeches, and the result was 11 parshios of the Book of Devarim.
Devarim,
Be'eschanan,
Ekev,
Ra'eh,
Shoftim,
Kisetse,
Kisavo,
Nitzavim,
Vayelech,
Ha'azinu,
Vizos HaBracha.
With the grand finale, the final speech, taking place on the 7th day of Adar, the day of his passing. Moshe the speaker, Moshe the speech maker. For an important event,
such as at your bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah,
it's up to you to speak to the guests. This speech is not something you'll think of on the spot. You will invest a lot of thought and research into it.
And you will probably get some help preparing the speech.
Speaking of speeches,
there are some people, such as kings, presidents, and prime ministers, who employ full-time speechwriters for themselves.
These professional speechwriters are creative and talented and know just how to fill the speech with the right ideas, stories.
Oh, I know this story.
That's a terrific story.
And even jokes.
That one tickled.
But there was no speechwriter from Moshe Rabbeinu.
And no jokes.
These speeches were straight from his heart. The previous 4 books in the Torah are full of Hashem's words, which Moshe faithfully documented. Devarim, our rabbis of the Talmud say,
Moshe said it on his own.
Can you imagine? I had no idea.
Moshe's set of long speeches fill the entire book of Devarim, a total of 11 parshios.
Wow!
This book, our wise sages tell us, is also called Mishnah Torah,
meaning a repetition or a review of the Torah.
You may have seen this hard-to-pronounce word.
Deuteronomy.
I don't know what that word means.
It's from ancient Greek, meaning second law.
Get the idea? Deuteronomy is Mishnah Torah.
Mishneh Torah, what's it all about? To understand the need for this repetition, also known as Mishneh Torah, let's put ourselves in the shoes, or sandals, of our forefathers in the desert. Bnei Yisrael had been traveling in the desert for almost 40 years. The older generation, all men 20 years and older at the time of the spies episode, had passed away. Now their children were all grown up, ready and anxious to enter the holy land of Eretz Yisrael. At last,
Moshe, the wise, experienced, and loving leader, is there to give them just the right lessons to help them in their mission.
True to his name, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, was an excellent educator. At the end of every lesson, a skilled teacher reviews key points with the class, making sure that they get the most important parts down pat. At the end of the entire school year, this capable teacher will give them a general review of everything they learned, but certainly not all the details.
He or she will focus on the main points, whatever is most important for the next year's challenging grade.
Back to our parsha.
Bnei Yisrael were about to graduate from the desert classroom, and Moshe Rabbeinu was making sure that they were ready for their grand entrance into Eretz Yisrael, focusing on whatever he thinks is important.
Moshe will spend the next days recounting their adventures in the desert, peppered with a bit of tender loving scolding, and reminding them of all the ups and downs along the way, sometimes more downs than ups.
And let's not forget, he'll also give them plenty of pep talks, telling them to learn from past history, trust in Hashem, and everything will work out for the best. Better than the best.
In Sefer Devarim, Moshe will review many mitzvos they already learned,
such as keeping kosher and Shabbos.
He will add some important points to mitzvos they know about,
and even teach a lot of brand new mitzvahs.
Now that they will be entering Eretz Yisrael, also known as Eretz Canaan, among non-Jews whose entire lives revolve around idol worship, Moshe warns them time and again of its dangers.
It is evil.
Pure evil.
Wicked.
He guides them with some helpful ways to make sure they don't get caught up in that big idol-worshipping mess.
We'll hear from Moshe some wonderful blessings for doing mitzvos.
Yes! Yes!
And harsh punishments for not doing them.
Oh, you can't! You mustn't!
And believe it or not, towards the end of Devarim, we'll be treated to a beautiful poetic song called Shiras Ha'azinu, coming from Moshe Rabbeinu.
So the book of Devarim is sort of a book of opposites. It contains sad stories of past mistakes
and words of encouragement for a new time and new place.
It contains many mitzvos,
some old and some new.
Devarim was inspired by Hashem,
but it's also Moshe's personal message to Bnei Israel.
Devarim has everything the Jewish nation will need to help them graduate. A great speech from a great leader. Bnei Yisrael were camped in the land of Moab, just outside Eretz Yisrael, on the first day of the Hebrew month of Shevat in the year 2488, almost 40 years after the great Exodus. Moshe called the people to gather together, Kol Yisrael, all Bnei Yisrael, men, women, and children. Miraculously, everyone,
over 2 million people,
was able to hear everything their leader had to say.
That sounds awesome.
That was a miracle.
What an unexpected pleasure.
Standing before the entire congregation, Moshe spoke in a loud and clear voice, as Hashem describes in his Torah,
"His eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone."
Moshe waited until just the right moment to give his final set of speeches before passing from this world. It came after a lifetime of doing so much for his people.
Let us listen carefully to our great and wise leader, Moshe.
They said to each other as they moved closer to him, soaking in every word he said.
Great leader is not the word. He is an incredible leader.
Incredible? He's courageous. Not like your typical leaders who are only good at giving orders. Moshe himself leads the way.
And what do you say about Moshe's single-handed victory over the mighty great King Og of Bashan? He zerschmettert him.
Zerschmettert? What's that?
Crushed, crumpled, destroyed, demolished, shattered, and totally wiped him out. That king is history. History. Crushed, crumpled, destroyed, demolished, zerschmettert him.
Zerschmettert.
History.
Bnei Israel took Moshe's words the right way, not as criticism, but as words of wisdom from their faithful leader. They had witnessed the great things that Moshe had done for Bnei Israel, and they understood how much he wanted them to scrub themselves clean from the past and enter the Holy Land as holy people. Remember? Flashback time! At the beginning of his speech, Moshe gave them some quick flashbacks. A sort of history lesson, reminding them in brief about some past episodes. Here at Shazak, we'll take you back in time to experience those flashbacks. Are you ready?
Ready or not, here I come!
Buckle your seatbelts and tighten your helmet. We're about to travel back in time.
Remember? Grave complaint.
Moshe took his audience back to the Parsha of Bishalach.
Remember how terrified you were before the miraculous splitting of the sea?
It's flashback time!
Bnei Yisroel stood on the shore of the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, and they were in for a shock. They were terrified.
Look, the Egyptian army!
They screamed,
led by Pharaoh himself.
Indeed, in front of them was the raging sea. And closing in behind them was Paro's mighty army. Bnei Yisroel split into 4 arguing groups, each one of them trying to convince Moshe to follow their strategy. The first group shouted,
Moshe, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you had to bring us to die in the desert? Let us surrender and go back to Egypt.
Now back to our Parsha.
Moshe now turned to his people with words of encouragement. I recall vividly how the nation was in total despair. They all thought that it was the end of them, but thank Hashem, it was not the case. Always remember, Hashem loves us all deeply and will protect us forever and ever. Remember? Complaining for food.
The next stop on memory lane is once again in Parshas Bishalach.
Remember when you complained about food in the desert? Let's revisit that episode and refresh our memories.
We are going to starve to death.
We should have stayed in Egypt. At least there we had bread and meat.
The very next morning, when people looked out of their tents, they saw something very unusual.
What was that?
The ground was covered with round white flakes.
And remember how Hashem supplied you the gift of man that lasted all these 40 years in the hot desert?
day by day? Yes, dear children, concluded Moshe, your parents may have angered Hashem with their complaints. Nevertheless, he cared for them with love. Remember the golden calf. Remember the golden calf episode right after we received the Torah on Mount Sinai?
Time for a flashback. Back to the book of Shemos in Parshas Kisisa.
Micha threw this golden plate into the burning fire and shouted,
"Rise up, ox!"
Did you see what I saw?
Did you see what I saw?
The people screamed,
Look, it is an eagle, a perfectly formed baby ox.
And it's made of gold!
It's an eagle hazov, a golden calf.
Remember how much gold there was going out of Egypt? Recalled Moshe. Yet it was used for a golden idol, pure avodah zarah. But the lesson was clear. Gold is for holy purposes, like making Hashem's Mishkan beautiful. Remember sinning spies.
Then Moshe reminded them of the tragic spies episode.
Remember how it was demanded of me to send so-called spies to the Promised Land? Moshe said. Suddenly, the spies were face to face. Well, more like face to foot. With the shock of their lives. Giants!
Look up!
They exclaimed.
Gigantic giants! Humongous humans! Big Boitschkiller!
Yes! Towering way above the trees, 3 giants looked down at the spies.
"Hey,"
said one gigantic giant.
"those little creatures down there are taking our fruit. What are those creatures anyway? Grasshoppers?"
Remember how 10 of them brought back a bad Lashon Hara report?
How can ordinary people survive there? It's a land of giants. We saw them with our own eyes. We were like grasshoppers. Do you hear? We were like grasshoppers compared to them.
That terrible mistake cost us 40 years of travel time, Moshe concluded. But now, I am confident you all realize how good the land is and are ready to settle it. Remember cousin Korach's uprising.
Moshe then brought up an episode from Parshas Korah.
Remember the rebellion led by my cousin?
"Follow me,"
he announced with a confident grin on his face.
"and you will all have the opportunity to do the holy work in the Mishkan."
3 cheers for Korah!
And remember when the ground opened up and swallowed those rebellious people.
Hey, it's a giant earthquake!
It's a giant earthquake!
No, it's more than an earthquake. It's a miracle. I was just standing a few feet from Korach, yet I wasn't swallowed up.
The lesson we can all learn from this tragic Korach episode is the importance of peace and harmony. Little Moshe versus Big Og. Remember yet another episode? A giant one? Moshe asked. It's a story of the small versus the big. And who wins? The small. That's me. Do you know why? Because although I may be small in size, Hashem is on our side. Indeed, Hashem delivered into our hands Og, the giant king of Bashan, and all his people.
Flashback time to the end of Parshas Chukas.
Bnei Yisrael headed north toward a place called Bashan and were met by a frightening giant named Og, king of Bashan.
He came with an entire army ready to fight and demolish Bnei Yisrael.
Hashem said to Moshe, "Fear not, for I am with you. I will deliver Og, his people, and his land into your hands."
Suddenly, Og picked up an enormous rock.
More like a small mountain, and lifted it high up in the air. He was about to drop the rock on top of the entire Jewish people. But once again, Hashem came to the rescue. Gazillions of ants ate through the rock. The inside crumbled, leaving only a ring of stone, which fell onto Og and got stuck around his neck.
Og tried to get it off, but his teeth got stuck in the rock.
While Og had his head at the rock, Moshe quickly picked up an axe, jumped up, and swung it as high and as hard as he could. He hit Og's foot, and the giant toppled over and died. That was the end of Og. Mishnah Torah, the bottom line.
So we learned a lot about Mishnah Torah. How it differs from the previous 4 books of the Torah.
Why it's called Mishnah Torah.
And a lot more.
Bottom line, Mishnah Torah may be translated a repetition of the Torah, but it's not.
It's those points in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu decided that need to be repeated again and again and again in preparation of a new era, a new generation entering the Holy Land.
Phew! That was some long Shazak Parsha.
We learned a lot about Mishnah Torah, but it's only the beginning. To find out more, tune in next week to Parshas Ve'eschanan. You'll also see how Moshe reviews the 10 Commandments, teaches the second paragraph of the famous Shema,
and introduces some brand new mitzvahs.